When I want to get information, I go to the source. I do. I go to the source, and that source is Bobby Carpenter. I got to put my mic in. Just did my last show without one of the greatest rants I've ever had. I got to put my mic in. Bobby, you know these guys in the NFL. Thanks for joining, by the way. You know all these guys. You've seen all the names. You know the operation. Who in your mind would make a good head coach, and maybe where would they make a good head coach?
Well, it's interesting. One of the guys who, just recently was terminated, who I was with in New England, who I thought did a fantastic job, especially this last year, Brian Flores in Miami. And I think he was a young coach, first-time head coach when he came in. And as any new coach will always attest, like, it's not necessarily coaching the game, coaching the players, it's managing your staff. And so one of the issues he had at Miami, I think he had 5 different guys calling plays on offense. And so that's what they said was one of the issues that he was kind of dealing with. But if you look at what he did down in Miami the second half of this season, they rattled off 6 or 7 straight wins, got above 500, beat New England in a game where New England was potentially playing, for the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. Miami's playing for nothing, and they go out there and win. So that tells me he relates well to the players. They got better every year. They had basically mortgaged everything at the current time to selling off all their assets to be able to draft players and get better moving forward. And they did, and they progressed. And I think they got a little better every year. And so I love Brian Flores as a guy. I really like Josh McDaniels as well too. I think, I know the whole thing happened with Indy and he didn't have a great situation in Denver and it didn't necessarily turn out the best, but a lot of times, we call them retreads, but coaches that get an opportunity when they're young, all of a sudden they take a step back, go back to being an assistant, hopefully with a really good coach, learn some more things. They understand what they didn't know, and they maybe pay a little bit more attention to that. And then they can potentially be, have a better opportunity the second time around. And the third guy I really like out of that group, and it's a similar situation for him. He's got a great coaching pedigree, came up under Bill Parcells, guy played in the NFL. He understands it. He gets it. And he went to the New York Jets where everything's kind of an abject disaster for the most part, is Todd Bowles, who's the defensive coordinator for Tampa Bay, who's done a fantastic job. And, I know all those guys well. I played for them, was, around them. And I think that they all relate well to players. First-time head coach is tough for anybody, very tough in big markets, especially in, dysfunctional organizations, which I think, Todd Bowles and maybe even to a certain extent Brian Flores was a part of. But I think those guys would make really good head coaches the second time around. I really like the Jacksonville situation if they get rid of Trent Baalke. Dan, I'm not a fan of his.
Why not?
Well, you look at what happened with the only thing that Urban Meyer and Jim Harbaugh might agree on is probably their dislike for Trent Baalke. And you saw what happened out in San Francisco with Trent. Now it got sideways with Jim Harbaugh. And here's the thing that you don't deal with in college, because college, you're at the top of the heap. You answer essentially to the president, maybe the board. And if you're winning, like, everything's always taken care of. Well, in the NFL, you have layers. And so you have your general manager in between. And that's what Trent Baalke, he's trying to maybe grab more credit than he was due. And then, the old adage, if we're not winning, the coach says it's because we don't have the players. The GM says it's because the coach can't coach the players I gave him. So you need alignment with those guys. And Trent Baalke was described to me one time as being a chameleon. And if I'm building any team, a chameleon might be great for a player who can maybe play in a lot of systems. But when I'm talking about coaches, I'm talking about front offices, I want guys with character. I want people with moral fortitude. I want people that are going to stick by what they believe in, and they're not just going to shift with the prevailing wind. And I feel like that is a little bit of Trent Baalke's MO. I've heard that from multiple people, across the NFL, coaches, media. I think he'll be a detriment to them getting a head coach. But if you look at that, they have an owner that wants to spend money. Jacksonville doesn't have the most loyal fan base you're going to find. But I think the young roster is kind of improving. And I'm a believer in Trevor Lawrence. I think that he can be pretty good. And honestly, like, they're in a division where Houston's in a massive rebuild. You saw what happened this year with the Colts. Like, they're good, but it's not like they're striking fear in the heart of the NFL. And then you've got Mike Vrabel and what he's done in Tennessee, which is very impressive. But I don't think anybody looks at them as if, it's Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs where, on any given day they can go drop 40 on you. So it's a pretty good situation right there, but you have to remove a general manager that if a coach doesn't trust, and you don't believe that he has your best interest and that we're going to win and lose together. Like, you're giving me the players. We're going to work on what we need. You identify them. You give them to me. I'll tell you what I like in certain guys. And then we've got to own this together as a unit. And then we report to the owner together. It's not, hey, we're losing games. And after the GM thinks, hey, you know what? I think the owner's kind of fallen out of favor with this. I all of a sudden jump on the owner's side and we're mismanaging games. We just need a different coach. The roster's good. Because that's the type of stuff that happens in the NFL, Dan. It's a little Game of Thrones-esque where you see some guys that are always jockeying for position to be next to the ownership.
Bobby, I have a very good friend, 3 actually, that were general managers, assistant general managers, and head coaches. They all say this: there are winners in the NFL, there are losers in the NFL, and then there are survivors in the NFL. And you're describing exactly what has been described to me as the survivor, the chameleon type guy. All right, you talked about general managers. Is there anybody that you think would make a good general manager that you know?
There's 2 guys that I like, and I base this kind of off how they constructed rosters. And so I'm not going to necessarily get into all the wins and losses, because I think coaches play a large part in that, and part of it is hiring coaches. The number one guy who I like a lot, and if you look at the roster that has been built in New Orleans, Mickey Loomis has kind of taken a step back from that, but Jeff Ireland, he was with the Cowboys. He came up under Parcells. He was in Miami, and then all of a sudden, things get sideways and he ends up in New Orleans, and he's quietly built that roster that I don't think anybody would disagree that you watch the New Orleans Saints, if you gave them a good quarterback, like, that's a team that could potentially contend in the NFC. So they're right there. They've drafted well. They've signed good free agents. And so they're good at talent acquisition. And they're also good, Dan, as you know, this is being a coach, and this is true for any sport. You have to make sure that you're getting pieces that fit. And I heard a coach tell me a long time ago, GM, he's like, we're just not acquiring talent. We're trying to build a team. And so you have to make sure that the guys, their personalities fit, their skill sets fit with what you're trying to do, with how they fit with the guys around them. And so all of those things need to be taken into account. They've done a great job in New Orleans with it. And there's another guy, too, who just recently got fired. But if you look, at Minnesota, they've really never gotten the quarterback situation right, but it's really hard. Kirk Cousins has been good. He hasn't been great. And they were reaching because the rest of their roster is really good. They hit on a lot of picks. They built the team pretty well. They're in the process of trying to get younger and transitioning through that. But I thought that they did a really good job of building that team out and what they were ultimately trying to do. Like, you think about this, they find Adam Thielen, he's a gem. But, they take Stephon Diggs in the 3rd, 4th round, turn him into a great player. You realize you can't pay him. You send him to Buffalo, you get some compensation back because you can't afford his salary with everybody else. And then what do you do with that compensation? It's easy to have, a 1st round pick, 2 firsts, a 1st and a 2nd, whatever you're getting back. But how do you use it? And he takes that and he drafts Justin Jefferson, who's incredibly productive, and he's productive at a fraction of the cost. And so that's how you're able to exchange that, like DeForest Buckner out at San Francisco. Like, you trade guys when they have to get paid, because you can't pay them. And if you can get high compensation back, you have to hit with those picks. And that's something I think Minnesota's done pretty well for the majority of Rick Spielman's career. So Jeff Ireland, I love. I think he needs to get another shot as a general manager. And I think Rick Spielman should be a guy that people should look at as well.
When you go across the board here and you look at teams and resources and assets and ownership, and why, Mara came out and said the Giants is the most embarrassing they've ever been. Why? Why are they so inept? What's going on there?
Well, I mean, you look, they've had 3 coaches in 6 years since Tom Coughlin left.
Yeah.
And for an organization that you would talk about being incredibly stable for a long time, ever since, 1982, 83, whenever they hired Bill Parcells, like, my dad was there then. Like, the Giants, this is what people forget. Prior to, like, my birth in 83, because I've always known the Giants to be good. Heck, they've won 4 Super Bowls since 86. Like, not many franchises can say that. And they've been competitive just about every year. But before that, they were a laughingstock. And so they slowly turned this thing into a monster over about the last 40 years. But they did it through stability, the right coaching hires, stability in the front office, drafting well. And after Tom Coughlin left, you had Pat Shurmur, you had McAdoo, and now Joe Judge. I think a lot of this last piece was Gettleman. I was never really a huge fan of Gettleman as the GM, because to me, I don't want my general manager talking a lot. I don't want him pounding his chest about his draft picks and talking about everything that he does. You're not like stay in the background. Just do your job, pick your players, be in line with your coach, figure out what we're going to do cap wise with free agency, and Gettleman, big ego dude. And I've never really felt like the biggest ego guys in the front office. Like, I don't feel like they're really great for an organization. And so they've got to, number one, get their general manager right. They've got to draft a quarterback because Daniel Jones isn't it. And so, with that, I don't think their roster is very talented as well. And so, like, these are the 5 criteria. I threw on a Carps Corner because I sat here down breaking down all of these teams, all the 7 jobs that are open. And I rank it like this. I'm going to give you a grade on your quarterback. I'm going to decouple that from the rest of the roster. What's your grade on the rest of the roster? Your organizational stability, as far as, what's it like? I mean, do you have GMs in and out? Is your owner going to spend money? How consistent are they? Do they give people time? Will they give them patience? The city that you play in, because that does matter, getting players there a little bit. Does the city back you? Do fans show up and support you? And it's tough when you have a bad product. And then lastly, the division you play in, because you're going to see those teams, 6 times. It's tough. If you're trying to take the Broncos job, you're talking about going against, Herbert with the Chargers, Mahomes, with the Chiefs, the Raiders made the playoffs. Like that's a tough gig. Even if you're a good team, you may struggle to win 8 games. So like, as you rank those jobs, I try to look at those 5 criteria. If I'm a head coach looking at it and saying, where can I go and ultimately win and make sure that I have the best chance to do so?
Okay, let me ask you, if of those jobs that are open right now, and you're a guy that, you could pick any of them, which job's the best job for Bobby Carpenter to be the head coach of?
Gosh, it's tough because none of them are flawed. That's why they'd be open. I honestly think if Miami, the problem is like the fan interest is dwindling. Stephen Ross will spend money, but Tua has played a lot better. I thought at the beginning of the year, he was probably a guy you would have given a C+ grade to. I think he's played himself into a B- for the quarterback, which is the most important part of that equation. You have an organization that's going to spend money. You have the rest of the roster, I believe, is pretty good. Waddle was good. Gesicki, you've got some good offensive weapons. Xavier Howard, really nice corner. Like you have the pieces there. And then here's the one thing that's kind of laying in the weeds for all of these teams. Russell Wilson is probably going to be out in Seattle. And then Deshaun Watson is probably going to be playing in the NFL next year. And he's probably not going to be playing for the Houston Texans. And his preferred destination is the Miami Dolphins. And so you have Tua who's playing better, so you could keep him, or he's a more valuable asset now than he was. You've got an organization that wants to spend money. The problem is the division. New England's going to be consistently good until Bill Belichick leaves. And then you've got Josh Allen up in Buffalo. But I like the Miami job. I'd like the Denver job if it wasn't for that division. Like that's where you start falling into some traps, with some of these different jobs that are opening. Like the Chicago Bears, I love the quarterback. The rest of the roster, like Allen Robinson's probably not coming back. There's some other deficiencies there. And if, McCaskey, the house is like, if they'll spend some money and they get the new stadium and get some things rolling, eventually Aaron Rodgers will be gone. But the problem is, Dan, is you can't wait around like these guys. It used to be you get 3 to 4 years. These guys are all getting fired in 2, so you don't have the timeline to outlast Aaron Rodgers or to wait for a new stadium anymore.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, really, Aaron Rodgers, how Biasucci, whatever his name, you think he's going to be the time job with the Raiders? Will he be the head coach?
If you win a playoff game, given everything they went through, it's going to be really hard to not keep him on. Like if you look at what he went through, he took over in turmoil. They're in a really tough division, which no one's even talking about that as well. You have a guy in Ruggs, the vehicular homicide. You have to cut another one of your first-round draft picks in Damon Arnett. And all they've done is go out there and win games, and they won a gotta-have-it game, a must-win against another team with a great young quarterback in their division. It's going to come down to whether Mark Davis just, do you want to keep him, or is there someone else that you just really want? I think he's deserved a shot to be the long-term answer there, but unless unless Mark Davis is saying, hey, I really want Jim Harbaugh. I really want this guy, which, owners, they get in their mind. They think there's a guy for their team and their organization, and it doesn't really matter what else is out there. They're just going to go for it.
Who wins the game? Can they win? Can they beat the Bengals?
I think they keep it close. I think the spread's about 6.5. I would take the points, but I ultimately think Cincinnati wins, man. They've got an explosive offense. The only issue is they've got Yannick Ngakoue, Max Crosby. They're really good where Cincinnati's really bad. And so that comes down to coaching. How good is Zach Taylor going to be to eliminate that pass rush? Can you find a way to slow it down? Because if you do, I think we've seen what Joe Burrow can do.
I happened to be at the Raiders-Colts game, and I couldn't take my eyes off Max Crosby. I just couldn't. I mean, the dude just goes, man. The dude, he's insane how hard that kid plays. Patriots at the Bills. I would love to see the Patriots get a win. I'd love to see Belichick versus Brady. The spread on this is the Patriots getting 4. What do you think?
It's another game I'd take the points. Bill's going to find out, what type of game this is going to be. It's going to be like -1 or -3 at kickoff. I mean, the NFL's giving you what you want in prime time, but I don't know if it's going to be something as a player you're really going to enjoy. A night game like we talked about up in Buffalo. I think it's going to be inside the number. I'd take the points. I ultimately think Josh Allen gets it done. He's been playing well enough. He looks good. I think the Bills squeak this one out, but it wouldn't stun me if the Patriots win it, but I will lean to the Bills slightly.
When you look at the Eagles going into the Bucs, I mean, the Eagles just got destroyed. It's a great story. Nick Sirianni's done a really good job. Jalen Hurts, I guess, has solidified himself as the coach. What happens in this one? This is an 8.5-point spread. This is the biggest spread of the week.
Yeah, it's a big line. It's a big number. I would take the points on this. I'd take the points on this one as well. I think a lot of these games are going to be really close. That's a lot of times how the playoffs just work. They played earlier this year. I think that, Eagles lost by 6. But you're talking about the Eagles struggling. It's not like the Bucs lit the world on fire the last game of the season. They struggled to beat the Jets, when you got Antonio Brown throwing his gloves and all this stuff. So he's gone. Godwin, is out for the season. Mike Evans has been injured, so they've got a lot of issues that they're trying to sort out. Tom Brady wins in the playoffs. I'll never bet against him, but I feel like Philly probably gets a backdoor cover, loses this thing by 7.
I was wrong about that. The biggest spread is the Steelers and the Chiefs. 49ers, this is a game after my own heart back in the day. 49ers and Cowboys.
Yeah, this is a game that if you're in the late 80s, 90s, like this is iconic, iconic NFL right here. There's something about Micah Parsons and what he's done to this defense. Like this was supposed to be an offensive football team, with the Cowboys, and they have Lamb, they got Cooper, they got Gallup. Well, now the trio has turned into a duo. You got Zeke. I really, there's all this offensive firepower, but it's been the defense that's been pretty darn good with Diggs and the young players and Parsons. So Micah Parsons came out, and said this. They're talking about San Francisco bullying with the running game and Deebo Samuel and everything that they're able to do, and I believe that they're really good at it. And I was thinking that could be the case. And I always wonder when players kind of shy away from it. And you hear Micah Parsons come out like, hey, I'm from Harrisburg. The bullies get bullied in Harrisburg. It's a tough part of the country. No one's going to be running the football on us. Like, I respect that he comes out and says that. I think Dallas wins this. I would 3 points is tight. Like, I would probably lean for Dallas covering this thing, but I think they get this playoff win. Mike McCarthy will probably do everything he can to maybe screw this game up, but I think Zeke and
why do you say that? Why is everybody on Mike McCarthy's ass?
Because you look at the last couple seasons he was in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, and then LaFleur comes in there and they win the NFC number 1 seed 3 years in a row. Like, the roster is very comparable, and if you watch some of his late game decisions, even with Dallas, like, they haven't been great. He's got a good team. I think that he's not getting the most. Coaches, Dan, that somehow, they're better. You look at their roster, like, how are these guys winning all these games? And then you look at guys like, hey, how are they not winning more games? Why is it this close? And I just feel like, Mike, I don't know if he really is innovative enough. I don't feel like he manages the games very well. He was privileged to have Favre and Rodgers. Like, and now you've got Dak, who's pretty good at 2. He's not quite to those guys' level. So I think they win, but I think a lot of times they win in spite of them.
Man, I'm telling you what, I think it's because Mike McCarthy kind of looks the part. Everybody's on his ass. I mean, he big old guy standing there in the cold, and everybody. All right, but you're a Cowboy guy. I mean, are the Cowboys good enough to win a Super Bowl?
I don't think they're good enough to win the Super Bowl. If you look at the NFC, I don't think they could beat Green Bay, and I don't think they could beat Tampa Bay. I do think every other team in there, they can win. They can win maybe a game, maybe 2 games in the playoffs, but I don't think they could ultimately come out and find a way to get through one of those teams in the NFC Championship game.
Would you take Jimmy G as your quarterback? Let's say in Indianapolis over Wentz. I'm sorry, I didn't. This is a side question, but would you take him over Wentz? Because everybody here in town wants to get rid of Wentz.
So the thing with Wentz, he's been up and down, and I always reference Bill Parcells because his comment was like, "I don't want any yo-yos. I want to know what you are." Okay, don't be a guy that goes out there and completes 70% of your balls and has 3 touchdowns, 300 yards, no picks 1 week, and then 2 weeks later you're out there, completing half your passes, throwing 2 interceptions, and you look terrible in 3rd down and red zone. And I feel like Wentz gives you a little bit of that, and it's really tough as a coach to game plan around it because do you game plan and lean on the guy who's great, or do you try to take something off the plate of the guy who struggles at certain times? Like I look at Jimmy G. He's a known quantity. I don't think he has the ceiling of Wentz. I think Wentz is more talented. He's got some better physical ability, but I also think he has a much higher floor than Wentz does. And so you have to ask yourself, if you're the Colts, do we need somebody who's going to play elite all the time with all the weapons we have and everything, or do we just need a guy who is good, who can make sure that the bottom doesn't fall out like it did against Jacksonville? And I honestly think with how the Colts roster is built, they don't necessarily need that guy to be some elite, ridiculous playmaker. They just need a guy to be able to go out there, get the ball to the guys that are open, don't throw interceptions, run a little bit when you need to, make sure you can hand it off. And Jimmy G, that's what he did with the Niners, and he took them to a Super Bowl.
That's Bobby, in Indy right now, the general manager is going to have a press conference at noon, and they've already not given Wentz a real vote of confidence. So you got to look, okay, who else is out there? And the one guy that I'm looking at is, Jimmy G's. You don't want some of these retread guys, and the free agent market's no good. All right, let me go to the Chiefs. The Chiefs in Pittsburgh. Big Ben said, "Hey man, we're happy to be here," or something like that. We're lucky to be here. We got nothing to lose. Do you think that plays in? Do you think nothing to lose factors in once the game starts?
I mean, I think he went full Lou Holtz and was like, "I just hope we keep it close." I mean,
he did.
He did. No one's picking the Steelers. I mean, what are they? They're double-digit dogs, I believe. Was it 12 in this game? And I don't know if they can win it, but I do believe Pittsburgh. You're from the Midwest part of the country. Pittsburgh, man, it's a proud franchise. It's a proud organization. They got a proud defense, and they haven't been great this year, and they needed a lot of help and luck to get in the playoffs. I don't think they win the game, but I have a hard time believing that in Ben Roethlisberger's final game that they're going to get boat race 45-10. I think it'll probably be a 1-2 score game, and maybe it ends up being 7 points. And, it wouldn't surprise me with the fans in Kansas City, afterwards, if they give Ben a standing ovation for his last game like that. I think it will be close. It will be competitive. I think the Chiefs win it kind of comfortably at the end, probably 7-10, but I don't think this is something where, Pittsburgh's going to go out there and lay down. And I think that's what Ben is trying to throw all that out there and just seed everything hey, we don't even have a shot. And everybody's hearing that. Kansas City, and no matter how good you are as a team of focusing in, when you hear that stuff and everybody's rubbing your back, man, it just relaxes you. It's a little massage. And that Steelers defense, they've been up and down this year. They haven't been great. Mike Tomlin's a good coach. They're going to have a game plan. They're going to be prepared. They got beat up earlier this year by him. I think that they play and they at least make this thing a game into the second half, maybe almost the start of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great – Ben went full Lou Holtz, man. He did. He went hey, I'm keeping you too long, but do you think he has one? When I watch Ben, I don't know 1/100th of what you do. He looked to me frankly, Bobby, he looked done to me. He would have to muster something up in this game, but he hasn't looked good to me. Physically, he throws the ball high, that kind of thing. You agree or disagree?
You know, you could see that kind of coming last year. He started having elbow injuries. His body's breaking down. He's taking a ton of hits. The dude's played almost 2 decades in the NFL, and he's played through some crazy injuries. And I always tell people, like, every time you get hurt, that's like hacking off like a little piece of your sports soul. Like, it never comes back. Like, you know, as you get older, like you heal less and less. And so, you know, you become a fraction ultimately of what you are. But this is the one great thing about sports, and especially like about football, where it's competitive. It's a collision sport. The elements come into play, like all these different things. But in sports, you feed off the emotion. And like you look at, you know, the night, you know, Brett Favre's dad passes away. He goes out there, you know, that week and throws, you know, for 4 touchdowns and all these hundreds of yards. You see these things happen. And like, I'm a believer that, you know, his team will rally to his side. I think he'll put on the best, whatever he has left, man. Everything, and I call it squeezing the sponge, dude. You squeeze that thing dry. That will be bone dry after the game. So whatever Ben Roethlisberger has left in that tank, anything in there, he's squeezing the blood from the rock. He's getting it all out. And with that, like, I think he'll put on a pretty good performance. I don't think he's going to limp out here, you know, throwing for 150 yards. I think he's going to do everything he can to keep his team in the game. I mean, because you know this, there is no tomorrow now for Ben. I mean, you're getting, hey, my elbow's hurting. I'm getting shots. I'm doing whatever. Like, I never am going to have to throw that fastball dig right down the middle of the field ever again in competition. Whatever, the pain, numb it up. Give me whatever I have. We're going out there, and this is my swan song.
Bobby, I offered him a basketball scholarship when I was a head coach at Bowling Green back when he was at Findlay High School. Did any Division I school offer you a basketball scholarship?
They did not offer me a basketball scholarship. I had actually, you know, this is the thing, you know, the age of specialization. I love playing hoops. And after my sophomore year, like, my dad looked at me, he goes, listen, I was a pretty decent player. And he's like, you know, you're a 6'3" white dude. He's like, you weigh about $180. He's like, if you want to keep playing AAU and running around, he's like, you're probably never going to get to the weight and size and all this stuff that you want to be. And so after that, I had laid, you know, I kind of got out of it because it's, you know, basketball, you practice all the time. And I loved it and I really enjoyed it. But after the season, like, my body was beat up from football. So I kind of took it off, lifted. And that's when I went from like 180 to 230 over like 3 years. Still go play some AAU with some of my teams. But unfortunately, I never did get a basketball scholarship, but I still have, you remember they used to put out those like Max Preps magazines, like the black and white. I actually got one from like the top 50 freshmen in the state that year. I was like hovering around the bottom, dude, like ratcheted on there like 49 or 50. You know, it's like a 6'3" wing dude who could go rebound and shoot a little bit, but play some great defense and, you know, do all the intangibles and probably put up like 15 points for you. I got in that, so that's like what I hang on to as far as like the peak of my basketball fame.
Lee Corso stopped at my house when he was the football coach at Indiana and pulled into my driveway and met with my mom and dad trying to get me to play football for Indiana. So I was the opposite. My dad said to him, have you seen the boy? He's 6'5", 170 pounds. What's wrong with you? No, we can make him a safety. And my dad looked at him, he goes, and he's slow. What's wrong? And then they had a cup of coffee and they ended up having a cutty, a drink. So anyway, you're the best, Bobby. What you got on Carp's Corner today?
Like I said, I go through all of the 7 jobs. I have my 5 criteria that I laid out there: quarterback, roster, organizations, city, division. Rank all those, go through all the games, get into a little bit of some of the stuff that's surrounding, you know, the playoffs. Why I think Joe Burrow is going to get it done and may win a game, maybe even 2 games for the Bengals, because he's a big time guy. He always seems to perform when the lights are the brightest and does so with like a smug arrogance that's absolutely amazing.
I know. He has a punchable face, man. He's got a punchable face. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks for the time, man. Always fun.
My pleasure, Dan. Look forward to it.